welcome to this session, which is supposed to move from the talk to actions, from words to actions. We have a lot of talks about the SDGs, but what are we doing in practice to promote the SDGs? That's really the focus of this session, focusing on the role of the private sector, and the title is From Words to Actions, Innovative Solutions to Make the SDGs Work for Engaging the Private Sector. So we have a very distinguished panel with us today, coming from different perspectives, to try to share with us some of their insights on what they are doing in relations to achieving the 2030 agenda for development, and I will introduce them to you in 1 minute. But welcome to this discussion. Perhaps just before we start, a couple of comments on the modalities. If you have downloaded the app on your phones or your tablet, you have the possibility to ask questions online, and for that you need to go to the home, the little tag on the left corner of the app, and you have to select Q&A, and then you have to select the room where we are, and we're in the auditorium 2, so you have to select A2. And if you do so, then you have a little window where you can type in your question, and after the first round of discussions with the panel, we'll open for discussions, and then we'll be able to read some of your questions. Of course, if you want to have direct interactions, we also have that as well. So we will have a microphone at the end of the panel discussion so that you can ask directly your questions. So you are free to use any of the modalities you want. You're, of course, most welcome to tweet. And on Twitter, it's the hashtag EDD16 that you can use. Last, we'll have a bilingual panel. At least one of the speakers will speak in French. So most of the discussion is in English, but one of the speakers will be in French. So if you need a headphone, please collect one now. Well, I'm very pleased to have this very distinguished panel with us today. And perhaps I will start in the order of Mr. Guimba Saidou, who is the Senior Vice President of CES Satellite, so private sector perspective, who will talk to us about why satellite matters for the SDGs. We have Madame Azouzzi, qui est la présidente de l'Association des femmes entrepreneurs.
She is the president of the Women's Entrepreneurs Association in Morocco. So she's definitely going to give us a perspective from an entrepreneurship point of view, but also the role of women together with a development project with DJO, which is undergoing.
Who is the Director General of UNIDO, very active on the industrialization front and giving a new impetus on this discussion. So thank you very much for joining us. We have Ms. Grete Faremo, who is the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations and Executive Director of UNOPS, which is the United Nations Office for Project Services. She'll tell us more. I mean, if you were like me, I didn't know exactly what UNOP was about, but a lot of investments, public-private partnership, procurement activities that are conducted. We are very honored also to have Mr. Christian Danielsson, the Director General of DG NEAR. Thank you very much, who will be able to also give us the European perspective. We have a fantastic young lady. I had the chance to have a chat with her, and she has very interesting experience. She's a young leader, but when you listen to her, you have the feeling she has already lived 3 or 4 lives. Rose Sakala, who will challenge probably a bit also our more established speakers. And we have Mr. Herbert Lust, who is the Vice President and Managing Director for Europe at Conservation International. So a large panel for discussions. I don't think I need to introduce the the SDGs and the role of the private sector that is much more important and much more stressed in the context of multi-stakeholder partnership in this 2030 agenda. And so we can perhaps directly move to this question of, we hear a lot about we need more public-private partnership, we need to involve the private sector more, we need to draw on these dynamics that is there. But how to do that differently from what has been done so far? And is that just a talk that is quite popular, or can we really have innovative solution? Let me start with you, Mr. Danielsson. What is the EU doing, especially in the context of the neighborhood policy? What is the kind of new impetus that you're giving following the 2030 agenda?
Well, first of all, it's very right that you point to the agenda as such, which has come into the center when we are looking into our planning and what we are doing. The countries or the partners that we work with, which are all the countries from Belarus to Morocco, and also those on Western Balkan, also south of the Mediterranean and Eastern Europe and Western Balkan. There, the issue also to meeting the Sustainable Development Goals is very much about seeing to that the potential for economic growth and inclusive economic growth can take place. Now, one thing is the framework for it, which is the structure, but the other is to see that the actors can contribute. And that's where the private sector comes in. And therefore, very much of what we are doing right now is seeing to how we can help to establish the right framework and then provide for the instruments that can see to that the private sector can strive. And that boils down in concrete terms to, we are thinking very much in the novelty when it comes to leveraging instruments, particularly in such that can be used for SMEs. And we have quite good experience of it, but we are looking into how we can get that moving. We are also looking quite a bit into how we can transfer knowledge from the EU in terms of how small and medium-sized enterprises can operate. And that takes the form of concrete technical assistance to a large extent for small and medium-sized enterprises in particular.
You've been doing technical assistance for quite some time, no? I mean,
we have, but the difference,
not in this field?
The difference is that we are moving very much into small and medium-sized enterprises. It's difficult, but we try to do that and
targeting more the SMEs.
Absolutely, in order to try to target them more than what we have done up till now. And the third element, which is not directly targeting the private sector, but once again, framework for it, is that we are putting quite a lot of efforts into what we call the fundamentals, which is public administrative reform, which is the whole issue of reform of judiciary, which is fighting corruption, which all of them are essential in order to get the Sustainable Development Goals to be fulfilled. So I think that's where we are putting most of our efforts right now.
And you combine the two? I mean,
sorry?
You combine this support.
We combine it.
So
just take one example. If we look, for instance, on a country like Tunisia, which is particularly interesting right now, they have just a 5-year plan that is underway. So what we are doing there is that we are looking into how can we help them in order to do the reforms as regards the business environment, to do the reforms in which is public administration, etc. But at the same time looking into if we can get innovative instruments into place in order to see to that the actual actors on the ground, small and medium-sized enterprises in particular, can start to thrive. So these are the elements that we are working with. And perhaps finally, of course, when you talk about private sector development for partner countries close to us, but also further away, the contractual relation with the EU is important. The free trade agreements are important, and the access to the European market is important. So all of those elements comes in as well.
Thank you very much. We'll get back to in the discussion of perhaps some more concrete examples of what can be done. Mr. Lee Young, UNIDO is about industrialization. You must be very pleased that the SDGs are accounting explicitly for the importance of industrialization, something that we didn't really see in the MDGs. What is changing in the way you are operating then? What is the impact of the fact that this industrialization endeavor is finally recognized at the international level in the context of the SDGs?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sam. I think this is a very critical issue. We all understand the new SDG as a big challenge for all of us. Think about 17 goals. Actually, it's 3 pillars: social sector, environment, and economic growth. For economic growth, the most driving force is agriculture and industry. All the advanced countries gone through that, become advanced country, industrialized, emerging market economies, after financial crisis, refocusing on industrialization. But how to do it is really, we should have an innovative approach. For instance, we created a PCP, Program for Country Partnership. Why we? Because we listen to leaders, and they all talk to me, DG Lee, please help us to develop industry. What does industry mean? Job creation, growth. And they all understand if industry moving and the job creation, women development, lots of issues could be implemented. So how to help country to move ahead with industrial development? It should be inclusive. All the people, women, young people should have opportunity to share the prosperity fairly, and green, sustainable industrial development. So we help country to develop industrial strategy together with development institutions like World Bank, African Development Bank. And after that, country approve the strategy to implement it. During this process, they should work together, public and the private partnership. The government doing its own role, regulations, foreign exchange, financing, financial, and etc. Also, they should make big investment infrastructures, electricity, water, highway, and then private sector coming. Because if investment cannot guaranteed, cannot have logistics ready, they will not come. So this is a really PPP, public and private partnership. So based on this kind of thinking, we created a partnership country program for partnership. And
but Mr. Leong, if you allow me, I mean, in many countries, there are plenty of strategies. So since we're on a panel on words to action, how do you ensure, what is the dynamics to make that the strategy is translated into action? Because there are plenty in African countries. I don't know any African country that doesn't have a strategy for development and doesn't want to become an emerging economy. So how do you move concretely to the action?
This is a very good question. We look at Africa, least developed countries, 48 of them, African countries, 54 of them. But we need to select country with a strong commitment from leaders, committed to what? To economic growth, to the job creation. Second is a relatively functioning administration, and also the important, they have a strategy, stabilization in the country. Then we can move in. Now look at the 2 pilot countries, Ethiopia, Senegal. After 2 years of operation, you will see the jobs being created because a company coming, they create the job not by 10, 20, thousands of jobs created. This is a scale up the growth, job creation, only through this kind of program, nationwide. So you need to change its traditional way of doing business. From project-based, 500,000, 1 million project, change into the strategy support and really create momentum. We would like to expand this coverage, not only 2 countries, based on the demands of the African Union Commission. They would like to have more. Maybe next round, maybe 5 or 10 countries. I'm very happy this is one way of the new approach.
Perhaps starting small or starting on targeted countries is perhaps a way to ensure there is some progress, rather than some of these overall agendas sometimes that are good for framework, but where action is not really followed. Thank you very much, Mr. Leong. Ms. Grete Faremo, you UNOPS is not really well known, as I was quite rudely pointing out to you. How do you contribute to the SDGs, and what are the innovative dimensions that you bring to this discussion?
First of all, you are right, UNOPS is not that well known. We are a unique bird in the UN family, fully self-financed. So we only get paid for what we do. And if partners don't like what we do, they can walk away.
So you're forced to do action.
It's all about implementation, and how we can add value. So looking at the decisions made regarding the new SDGs, regarding how to fight climate change, and also looking at the funding needed. It was discussed in Addis Ababa, and trillions of dollars are needed every year. It was clear that official development aid is only a very small portion of what is needed. National resource mobilization is important, but it is actually working with the private sector that matters. So as a service provider, we are thinking innovation in 3 dimensions. Innovative financing. So far, very much of the development agenda has been about innovative ways of using public money, the public official development aid. How can we actually start working with the private sector in a more mature way, sharing the risks? It's about financial mechanisms. So we are now working on developing those financial mechanisms that would attract private investors, de-risking, sharing risk.
And can you give a couple of concrete examples of such mechanisms?
This is very much focused on infrastructure. So what would it take to bring projects to bankability? Clearly seed money. We work with public sector as well as private investors on building seed capital fund that could bring projects to scale, to profitability. And of course, it can be renewable energies, it can be managing waste, it can be also social infrastructure. Second, it's about procurement, sustainable procurement. It's important to do efficient procurement, but UNOPS is also one of only 4 organizations in the world that have qualified at a golden standard doing sustainable procurement. How do we do procurement, green, social, and financial in a good manner? Driving that is really important. And the third one is resilience. Resilience is not about fundraising only. It's about a method. It's about a thinking. It's about integrated planning. And to be aware of what it takes to build better, even build back better after a crisis is key. Infrastructure is part of UNOPS' mandate, and we really would like to see resilience embedded in the thinking of how we do infrastructure.
Thank you very much. Let's turn to private voice, private sector voice. Mr. Guimba Saidou, you are the president, or what is the exact title? President of the, vice president of CES. What is first CES? What satellites have to do with development, and what is concretely your contribution then to the SDG?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, so I'm indeed the head of the African operations for SCS, which is the world leading satellite operator. Why satellite? I think many of you probably are familiar with some pictures that basically will present Africa like the dark continent, because there is no, we're talking about energy or electricity. Just see the satellite as being one of those torches that could, bring light to the continent. But what I would like to start with, if you allow me, I may be a bit controversial, at least not, because I think we talk too much. And then sometimes most of the discussions really, it's almost like a fashion. I'm passionate about what I do. I also see things, firsthand being an African, crisscrossing the continent. We're just wasting time. There is no need really to reinvent the wheel, at least from our perspective. We all agree that, let's say, agree to Article 1 of the Universal, the Universal Human Rights, which is that we all equal, right? We also all agree that basically in order to conduct good business, you need to provide people with what they need. And so when we look at those emerging countries with a different perspective, it hurts me. Why, if we agree to all those, are we wasting our time discussing about doing pilots here, doing this here? Let's apply just the basic principles, in order to be able to be effective, at least from our perspective, is to address those needs directly. ICT has proven itself already. When you look at the way mobile industry has changed, really the continent. Previously, before that, people referring to the lack of resources, that in Africa in particular, more emerging countries, that people could not afford technology. So I think we have demonstrated through the boom of the mobile industry that this is not the case. We just need to move into actions. So today, what are maybe those big challenges or solutions that need to be provided? It's really efficient solution towards education, healthcare, agriculture, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, but what are you doing today?
Yeah, what we're doing are a few things. So one, we made some investment. The satellite that we have actually put over the continent, there are today 10 of them which are geostationary. We're talking about investment of close to 3 billion euros. We also have about 16 medium orbit satellites that also provide high-speed internet across the continent. We have launched those services in countries like DRC, even in Somalia or South Sudan. So these are concrete. But two more things, because we also need to make sure that we influence the ecosystem. One thing, when you look at, let's say, the need for teachers, for the next few years, we're talking about 2.3 million teachers that need to be come active, online on the continent. What we're doing is to support teleeducation by having concrete projects. We have a program called Elevate, which is basically just a training program, which allows us actually to transfer skills in many countries. And then we have done that so far in about 10 African countries. That's one. Two, we have also started a program called the Caravan. Why the Caravan? A caravan moves, right? We consider that there are 54 countries in Africa. It's not one country. So we really acknowledge that we need to have specific solutions for each of those countries. And we're traveling to those countries to just do that. So these are typical practical examples. We have also...
And you do that in partnership with some of the institutional actors? We're always hearing that we need to attract the private sector. Your story seems to show that at least private sector doesn't need necessarily to be attracted, but when do you need interaction with the public actors?
So for me, two things. So in most of those countries, we talk to the local decision makers. We try to educate them. Frankly, all the international organization that I've seen, it just takes too much time, and then it's a maze trying to find who you're going to talk to or where the funds are available. We don't have time. So what we do, we're ready to go. We talk to decision makers, and I can guarantee you, in most countries, when we don't have that sort of traction initially, if we go and start working with local partners, then the government and other actors come. I'll give you two examples. One, there is an application that we deploy called SatMed. The first time we deployed that was when the Ebola crisis was really at its peak in Guinea, Sierra Leone, and Liberia. And then soon after that, because people have really seen how technology has helped save lives and then also make things better, we have gotten traction with local partners. 10 days ago, we deployed another one in Benin, before that in Niger, and so on. So we talk to the decision makers. When I believe they start wasting our time, we just move to local partners. Because I can guarantee you, in every and each African country, there are people who want to change things. I was in Somalia recently, same thing.
So perhaps let's hear the local partners or the local private sector. What is your experience? Quelle est votre expérience du point de vue
What is your experience of the local private sector? Well, I will be talking about the local level, but also regional, because we have here the Director General of UNIDO, and we have an extraordinary project which we're working on with 6 countries from the Mediterranean banks: Tunisia, Egypt, Palestine, Lebanon, Jordan, and Morocco. And it's an extraordinary project because it does allow us to pool our efforts. And it's led by UNIDO, so I won't go into great detail about it. We discussed it during the first panel, but UNIDO is doing extraordinary work to carry this project forward. And what's the project about? Well, it's about encouraging entrepreneurship amongst women. So they are helping us with empowerment of female entrepreneurs. First of all, we carried out a study to identify obstacles, and we're working on those. And then we provided tools such as the COMFA, which is an extraordinary tool which helps us more specifically. Now, when you talk about the obstacles and the tools, well, we did talk about those during the first panel, so I want to speak about a more specific action in Morocco this time. Just to give you a bit of context, in Morocco, if we look at young women who have degrees, there are 50 to 60% in higher education, which is quite extraordinary. But in terms of employability, that's where things start to go wrong. 26% is the rate. What has happened to all of these women? And that applies all the more so to entrepreneurship. Only 10% of companies set up in Morocco are set up by women, just 10% of them. We've applied a nuance, though, to that. Since last year, if we look at self-employment, we launched that last year. That's about equal, 46% of women. So we deducted straight away that when things are made easy, when there's no capitalization, when the conditions are made more flexible, then women do undertake entrepreneurship. And one very specific activity we're carrying out in our association is that of incubators for female entrepreneurs. We are managing 5 at the moment, and we're trying to create 2 or 3 more by the end of the year throughout Morocco. And we assist young women, first of all, with awareness raising, because that is very important indeed. We do that at university level, school level, vocational training centres, and even on social networks, actually, and that works very well. So we carry out awareness raising amongst women. And we do that by having women business leaders who talk about their trajectory, because it's very important for young women to have role models. If you see a woman talking about their experience, then the young girl listening thinks, well, maybe it is possible after all for me as well. And that's very important. The next phase is the selection phase, because we can't help everybody. So we carry out a selection process for the most mature projects and ideas. And then we support them right through to the creation of their business and even beyond. So for 18 months after the business is created, we assist them in various areas. We provide financial support, legal support, social support, and so on. The idea being to help them to survive over those difficult months where there's the highest mortality rate amongst new businesses. So that is the specific action that we're working on. And I'd also like to emphasize the fact that women invest 80% in services. That's a figure. And 20% only in industry or agriculture. And we would like to encourage services linked to industry, and that's a sort of entry door, because then there will be a lot more women who can move towards industry without exactly being in industry. So all of the service activities linked to industry are something we could encourage women to do, so then perhaps they could move into industry itself. But it's very important first to move into services linked to industry, and then the next step would be for women to move into industry itself. Thank you, that was very interesting, and I'm sure that Sakala, who I will be asking in a moment, will also have experience as a young woman who is an entrepreneur. But let me first turn to Mr. Herbert Lust.
Normally when we talk about SDGs, there's a lot of questions about how to do that in a more sustainable way and how to have these dimensions of environmental sustainability, social sustainability. What is your experience at Conservation International?
So I think one of the elements when we talk about innovation and the SDGs and how we actually work with the private sector is that everybody knows that involving the private sector is important, but actually you need the right conditions under which to work for the private sector. So I think there's two sort of practical things that have happened in the last sort of 6 or 7 months that are important sort of in that relationship with involving the private sector. The first one is one that everybody knows. I mean, there was the Paris Climate Agreement. It was a great success, even if some people sort of frown a little bit. It was a great success, and we, together with a lot of other NGOs, actually were there with our business partners. So we actually involved CEOs of some of our business partners in those discussions. And what we see is that there's actually now an opportunity at that level to talk about climate and to talk about sustainable development that probably wasn't there even a year ago. So that's great. We've got a sort of at the top, at the CEO level, we can engage there. What has happened at the same time, and that very few people have seen sort of over the last 6, 7 months, is that on the ground, in the field, people are thinking differently about the private sector. So Conservation International is an organization that works in the field. We only work in developing countries. What we do is we demonstrate the viability of conservation programs that also deliver development goals. We scale those up to a global scale, so we do that in 67 developing countries. Now, obviously, when you work in the field, when you work in these countries, it doesn't really matter all that much what the CEO of a particular company thinks if that isn't sort of relevant to what the local decision makers want to do. It's crucial for people to make the right conservation decisions, for that to happen at the local level, be that local politicians, be that farmers. And so what we've noticed over the last 6, 7 months is that all of the investments in capacity building are actually slowly paying off. So I'll give you one example. Indonesia, we have a large project in West Papua. We have a sustainable landscape partnership there. And actually one of the local administrators actually sort of came to the conclusion a couple of months ago that he had heard from his fellows that there are these companies in Europe that actually sort of demand sustainable palm oil. So all of our discussions and all of these conferences and all of us setting up certification schemes and talking amongst each other, it's great, but as long as that doesn't transpire at that local level, that sort of doesn't really work. So we have a huge opportunity now, created probably over the last 6 to 7 months, where CEOs are interested in actually following up on the development goals. But we also understand that at the local level, people now see that making those decisions will actually create a return because there actually will be a market. And so there's an opportunity to do something both at the CEO level and at the local level, and that's a fantastic opportunity. We've had those opportunities in the past before. I'll give you an example of some of the work that CI does around coffee. 15 years ago, Conservation International started working around shade-grown coffee in South America. We worked with Starbucks to actually deliver that coffee to Starbucks. What we have now, 15 years later, is actually we have global projects, and we actually have a sustainable coffee challenge that isn't only around one company, Starbucks, but is trying to sort of make coffee to become the first sustainable agricultural product. So from that small scale to that large scale, and that needs CEO involvement, but also local decision makers seeing the economic value of that. Maybe just...
Yeah, you want to say one? I mean, this is good examples.
Another example is actually more recent, is around the Philippines, so obviously, and green infrastructure development. Obviously, the typhoon in the Philippines caused a lot of destruction. What we're working with private investors is actually to replace, instead of building grey infrastructure like concrete walls and seawalls, is to actually sort of replant mangroves. Mangroves that are naturally grown there have been taken away. They actually provide a very efficient and sort of a cheap sort of way of protecting against sort of like stormwaters. And they also provide a livelihood for the people there. They can actually sort of, so those are the projects that we work around, and we see because of that impetus with the CEOs and the sort of impact sort of at a local level, we see a lot of possibilities to do even more moving forward.
So the importance of the local level, we have with us Rose Sakala. We mentioned the role of women, young people. You are the winner of the Future African Leaders Award, which was awarded to you at the end of last year. You just won the Woman of Distinction in Malawi. You are yourself quite active, still a student, but yet also quite active from the, I understand, in trying to promote these local businesses. Can you tell us what is your experience on the ground?
Okay, thank you so
And
much.
how does
sir.
that perhaps relate to the broader discussion that is happening up there?
Thank you so much, San. The experience on the ground is so much different from what people at policy level talk about mostly. You know, when you're creating the documents and the policies or what you feel will work even with the sustainable development goals, it's not that straight on the ground. There are quite a number of challenges being at the grassroots level, where most of the policies that we document or the ideas that we have at high level will be implemented, and that being, number one, the gender aspect. I was glad to hear the statistics from the president from Morocco, as she was presenting that you have about 80% of women investing in social services with only 20% in industrialization. You know, that's quite huge, because it's the same way in my country. 80% of the people stay in the rural masses, and you have 20% in the urban sector. But even the 20, there's not much being done in industrialization. We're still focusing on subsistence level. So whatever we're producing at primary sector, which is not able to create to us with more jobs. And as the DG for UNIDO was speaking that they're investing in countries, that was really good to hear from me, because like in my country, we really need those kind of projects to scale up, because we've got to go into secondary and tertiary institutions to create more jobs. And then most of the people on the grassroots level lack skills, and that's where some of us come in to build that gap in entrepreneurship. The private sector may agree with me in as much as we're saying about partnerships. You will not partner with someone who doesn't have the skill. You only work with those that you feel are more, that are less risk to your projects and to your investments. So that's how we come, me and my colleagues come in to build that gap of capacity building. So we offer trainings in entrepreneurship, business finance, management skills, as well as how to make sure that the ideas are de-risked. So like for the Graduate Entrepreneurship Initiative, which I happen to be managing it at the moment, we incubate the ideas of the graduates to make sure that in the first 1 year, we help them with the documentation of the ideas and coming up with the business plan. And then in the second year, it's more or less like a window period whereby we're trying the ideas. So as they are graduating to the industry, we are sure that that idea is viable, it is working, and then if we to get the attention of the private sector to invest in the idea, it will work and it is less at risk. Yeah, so that's maybe just a snapshot of one of the projects I'm doing currently on entrepreneurship that is aiming to add value and improve on exports in my country.
Well, thanks a lot. It's quite uplifting to hear these grassroots initiatives that are happening. I mean, I think the discussion we just had shows that there's a lot of innovation and a lot of good ideas that are coming up. Well, I really would like to be able to open to the room for further discussion. So perhaps just a quick question to go through all of you. If we want to scale up, quite often we see there are nice projects, nice initiatives and so on, but to make the change, you have people who need jobs, who need to be able to provide. There's a huge population growth that is happening in developing continents, especially in Africa. So how to scale up the process? Can I ask you to each think about one or maximum two issues that you would think initiatives to be able to scale up?
Yeah, I think I think one thing which is essential is to see to that we are better in tapping the private sector finance in particular for projects in Africa, but also in the countries I work on. And that's why you have one example of it, which is very recent, and that is the initiative that the Commission took on the issue of migration last week, which boils down to putting into place a facility where you go in with 3.1 billion of grants in order to get a leverage of 31 billion in total. Now, that should be used for investments, but it should be in particular also be used in order to get private sector sprawling.
And how would that work?
Well, that's exactly what we will have to look into detail now. But what I see in front of me is a blending facility, which would come in and through IFIs be able to make projects bankable, and that way getting forward. That will be particularly important for the infrastructure side. I can see a guarantee facility coming in, which would be helpful for the private sector, not least. And then I can see quite a lot of...
Along the MIGA style?
Well, we have to look on the details of it. And then I can see also technical assistance in various forms coming in, not least what was mentioned about vocational education and training and all those kind of aspects.
Yeah.
Now, there is a need for that kind of approach, I think, in order to mobilize. So that's one element which I think is very important. The second one I think is important is to look on the framework condition. I'm coming back to that because in order, and you mentioned it, in order to get the private sector sprawling, there needs to be change in structures. And that is everything from fighting corruption, public procurement, the way the judiciary functions, etc. It's not sexy, but it's essential. And we can talk a lot about how we should get the more jobs in many of these countries. If that is not being addressed, there will be not very much of foreign direct investment coming in, and there will be difficult for the entrepreneurs to get into the market and make the projects living.
But is the Commission working with the UNIDO and
very
UNOPS,
much,
for instance,
very closely? As all of this we do very much in cooperation. And for the area where I am responsible, we are now closing very, very closely with the IFIs, with the World Bank, with the big donor institutions in the member states, and with others, in order to see to that we have, at least when it comes to the concept, together with the partners, a similar understanding, so that we are putting the scarce taxpayers' money at the right place.
Great. Yes.
I think scalability is completely dependent on demonstrated value in a project. You will not be successful in scaling something that is failing in the beginning. So to demonstrate value is
one can
really
learn from
key.
failures and know that these are the type of approach not to go through, but...
And then institutional investors nowadays don't get that big return on their investments in mature markets. They are looking for new markets. So these innovative financing mechanisms that allow them to join nations and international partners in achieving a more sustainable future are really important to explore. So the key question would be, what catalytic role can UN and key donors play? And what do we need to do to build both national capacity and embed UN values, universal values into the projects? Because this is where
I think... And what is the answer? I mean, we agree with
the matchmaking. Because already direct foreign investments flow into emerging markets at a higher scale than official development aid. But what do we need to do together to prevent exploitation, to support sustainability? And that is where these new ways of working together really can make a difference. But in the bottom, I think it is really important to demonstrate value in the single projects. They will not be able to scale.
We know it's single projects, but are you convinced from a private sector perspective? I'm turning to you too. I mean, what do you expect from the... I mean, you have a lot of initiatives. You invest because you expect on specific projects to expect to get returns. But if you want to scale up, what is the kind of support, and do you believe in the in the public-private partnerships that are proposed, or what are the kind of partnerships that would be really allow you to go a step further?
Oui.
Madame?
Alors, donc, je vais vous raconter une petite
Well, I could
anecdote.
tell you a little story about this. It'll be very brief,
Donc, le ministère de
but the Ministry for Women and the Family in Morocco organises every year a prize, and they award a prize to the three best projects led by women. Entrepreneurship projects, these are. Last time the minister rang me to say, well, here we are, we have €10,000 first prize, a €5,000 second prize. What can you put forward? And I said, well, we can provide support to those who receive the prizes. That's what we do, and that is what we have done. And the feedback we got was so positive that the minister came to me again, and now, and this is my answer to your question, we are setting up a big public-private partnership with the ministry and with a public agency for social development. Why this social development agency? Well, that's because they cover all stakeholders who need help. They have a big list of all of them, particularly feminine cooperatives in the rural and peri-urban areas. And then there's other associations representing the private sector. And I think this is a sort of tripartite partnership, therefore. And I'd like to include the university in it too, because that's important. So this partnership is extremely powerful. It makes a lot of sense. First of all, because the public sector alone can't do much. There have been a lot of initiatives, some more or less successful. The moderator, what kind of initiatives? The speaker, well, it was a sort of brainstorming. We got together, and the private sector alone can't act. It's not really their main role, in fact. But getting everybody together will, I think, accelerate the process, and we'll be able to move towards tangible results. So we're setting that up now. The private sector is contributing with its know-how. We know what kind of support these young women will need. And then the public sector has the power and the finances and the regulatory abilities, because we can come up against problems of rules or standards, and the government can help us there. So that's the role they can play, and I think it'll be something extremely powerful. Thank you. Mr. Guimba, Saidou now. You were saying that you're a multinational who links into local networks. What kind of partnership or initiative do you think would be necessary in order to have a lever effect on your activities? Well, I think there are two areas, two facets to this. Firstly, the business world. It needs to be improved. But this is one of the elements that really would allow us to speed up our work. In many countries, unfortunately, the procedures are very slow. There are calls for offers which have been responded to 2 years ago, and we still don't have the results. So the public procurement procedure is too slow. And it's not even them who may be financing things, but they are making the decisions. So the whole process needs to speed up. Many countries, for example, missed the deadline of June 2015 for the movement from to digital television because of this extreme bureaucracy. So I think that would help things a lot. So first, business then, and secondly, pooling our efforts. There are many projects which are carried out in an isolated way. We've been hearing about education, health and agriculture. It's as if there are these sort of parallel motorways, but our resources could be pooled. They don't need to be separate, and that would have a real multiplier effect to speed up growth and make the projects, allow the projects to reach a critical size and attract investment, because that's the kind of thing that does attract the private sector. So those are the two critical facets, I think.
Mentioning some initiatives that you're taking that are already doing changes on the ground, but what do you see in the broader context, the kind of two initiatives that could help to provide a leveraging effect?
I think sort of in order to scale up or to sort of like get to leverage, I think there's two things that I want to talk about. First is sort of like solutions, and that we don't have the right solutions at the moment. And the second thing is cycling, because I'm Belgian and I need to talk about cycling. So I'll talk about sort of solutions first. I mean, there is a lot of private finance available, and there's not a shortage of development projects. I think the biggest problem that when you talk to private investors who are interested in investing in development projects is they can't find enough investment-worthy projects. And I think one of the things that we as NGOs should take on, and that we at CI have started taking on, is it's not only about great conservation projects, it also need to be sort of projects that are investment grade, that have the right governance, have the right discussion of risk, and that's just something new. We haven't done that in the past. So what we've done within CI is we've actually created a private investment vehicle, the Alphelia Fund, you can look it up, where we basically looked at private investment to do some of those green infrastructure investments, like the stormwater and other issues that I talked about earlier in the Philippines. So actually tapping into that is really important. But there is really a shortage of actually good quality investment-grade projects. And so in order to scale up, that's something that we need to do. So we need to work at the capacity level within NGOs and in local countries.
So that's what Ms. Faremo was mentioning in terms of the need of project preparation and helping to develop good projects. Yeah.
And then the second thing is cycling. There's this sort of focus on, sustainability in corporate and the private sector is like cycling. There's a couple of companies really so far ahead, and then there's this sort of peloton, and then there's a couple of stragglers. But what we do, and we do the same thing as in the cycling match, we sort of focus all of our attention on those leaders. And that's great, and that has some impact. But actually, we need to work with the peloton. I mean, back to my example of the Bupati, the local administrator in Indonesia, who actually all of a sudden heard of these European companies that are interested in sustainable palm oil. That didn't come from reading a press release from Unilever, with all respect to Unilever. That was because Unilever pushed it down to the second tier, the third tier, the fourth tier, to the local companies who are in that peloton. So we need to work with the peloton and not only focus on the leaders. So two things to scale up: investment grade, make our projects investment grade, that is doable, and focus on the peloton, not only on the leaders.
Thank you very much. Not enough good projects. That's probably true for the some of the large projects. But Rose, I think you've experienced something different. It's not enough financing that is there. How do you see the scaling up?
I think in terms of scaling up, I would agree with from UNOPS. They were saying of de-risking of projects, and that's why we're working on mostly. Like in my country, the interest rate is about 43%. So the conditions for investments are not conducive for the private sector and everyone else, of course. So what basically we're trying to address and we're fighting for is to share the risk with the private sector. Like the premium, at least premium rate is 23%, and the basic lending rate is 20%. So if we share the 23%, it means whosoever gets a loan gets it at 20%. At least 20% is fair. But like for India, for example, the agricultural loans are going on 10%. So we're aiming for 10, but we're still coming up. So I think in terms of scaling up, what we need to do most is to work together in terms of de-risking the projects, because if we de-risk, then the rate at which one can have access to finance, which is the greatest challenge in most of the developing nations, will be solved. And then the other thing that I learned, and which I can recommend my government in my country, for example, through the chairman of reforms, who happens to be the vice president, Dr. Sanoussi Bilal, is how they have viewed the public-private partnerships. A lot of it we speak on it when we come to global stages or when we're looking for funding, but little is being done on the ground. But I just learned something this second quarter, that they call the private and the public partnership like a space for dialogue. Say, look, we aren't moving our economy. We still, the kwacha to dollar rate is still inflating every day, and inflation rate is quite high, it's about 23%. So how do we then move? So the private sector, we're giving in the things that hinder them from investing in the country, and the conditions that the public sector has set. At the same time, the public sector giving in what they expected from them. So the consensus was, they came up with terms of investment for in that case. So what I learned most was to see how himself, like the vice president, is so much into the reforming of partnerships. And every 3 months, he's personally going to monitor the individual sectors on what they actually said they're doing on the reform areas and in terms of partnerships. So if we're to move and scale up in terms of production, for example, let's de-risk the projects. That means we'll have a wider coverage to reach to a lot more people that can help in creating jobs that, or the projects that he's saying that are more variable. If you look at the returns, invest in the projects that, yes, they have good cash flows, they have good returns at the end so that we can move our economy. Because like in Malawi, we export most of the things. You even export some fruits, for example. So we wouldn't want that to continue if, as a country, we are to develop. But if you, as the developed countries, are to help us, then channel your aid of money to industrialization and not giving us necessarily food, and consider that as you're giving us aid and we're not eradicating poverty. So that is what I can say this morning.
Thank you. Mr. Leon, this must be music to your ears.
Yeah.
We hear everything,
this is
leadership,
a beautiful
industrialization, and you did not coordinate, I can testify.
No. The first time I met was a beautiful girl.
So how do you see these scaling up? I mean, and the way to respond to these aspirations, and what can be done, and perhaps if you can elaborate just in 1 or 2 minutes on how UNIDO is able to catalyze some of the energy around some of the projects you're pursuing?
Yes, I think this is a very important issue. If we are working as usual, as you mentioned at the beginning, we cannot achieve the 2030 development agenda within 15 years. So we should be innovative, as we first discussed. The second, scale up. How to scale up from our operations, for instance, like how to bring more private sector into a country or into an industrial park. We usually have this investment forum and bring the investors coming and also recipients coming. They negotiate, discuss directly. This is even more efficient than one company to a country looking for something. For instance, we are going to organize one important agro-business investment fair or investment forum in Addis on 5th and the 7th of October. That will be largest one, hopefully largest one, forum to bring the private sector coming, companies from Europe, companies from the Asia and the LAC region, even Africa region as well, and directly talk to the country in the continent to see how they can match the demands and needs. So this kind of scale-up forum is very, very useful. This is something already exists, but we try to bring more of the investors coming.
And do you have a bit of de-risking type of mechanisms that are surrounding this?
Oh, yes. De-risking is very good music to my ear, again, because the investors coming, as I mentioned, if we are not working on the regulations, on the policies, I don't think the private company will just come to waste money, because they make investment, they would like to get a return. This is a fairness for any company coming to make investment. But how to protect the investment? investment protection, how to have the profit remitted outside the country, foreign exchange regulation, how to actually facilitate investment, quick approval. Those are all the issues really important to provide assistance to private sector. Let private sector come in, do the business smoothly, create a win-win situation. Because locally, they have a job. They have women become entrepreneurs. Young people can get job. SME development, private sector development in the near future. So cluster programs scale up the process of industrialization is important. I think now it's a very common issue being recognized by the international community, particularly EU. I had a meeting with some officials here, and they mentioned to me they created a kind of fund for economic diplomacy. I really support that because they focus on the business environment, focus on the regulation issue, help countries to generate a sound environment for this investment, for private promotion. And this is a real thing. I really support that. You need to try to be one of partner with this kind of operation. I really be very, very happy to see this kind of diplomacy could be implemented through UNIDO. Thank you.
All right, that would be interesting. European economic diplomacy implemented via UNIDO. Do you have a word on the economic diplomacy fund?
Yeah, no, it's
just one word.
Yeah,
it's
what I started up with, the whole issue of seeing to that the framework conditions for the economy are the right one in order to be conducive for economic growth. And of course, the major element there is the situation for the private business, and that boils down to business climate in a broad sense.
Yeah.
And I think that is very essential to bring up because we can do as much as we want in terms of investments, etc., and try to get them there. If we don't get the business climate conducive in a globalized world for the business to grow, then you won't see it happen.
Well, thank you very much. Just aware we're running a bit behind time, and I know I've been informed by the organizers, and one of the organizers wanted just to make a very quick intervention, so I'll ask a couple of very quick interventions that we can then open up to question. One of the organizers is the African Diaspora Network Europe. I think for the sake of time, they agreed not to be on the panel, but I promised to give them the floor, and we have Mr. Rabuhihi, who just wants to make very short comments. 1 minute.
I'll be very short. I come from the business point of view. I come from Rwanda, and I've worked for about 3 years in the German industry, in the automotive sector. And if I ask most people in this room if you associate Rwanda with a very fast German car, probably most of you would say no. I decided to move back home and to start a partnership with a top German engineering company. And the first question they asked me was, what is the market, what is the situation of doing business in Rwanda? And I said, it's quite good. And then they asked me, do you have the skills for these people? And I said, well, we do have some of them, but we also need to look at the diaspora people that we have in Europe and in the US and China, because they are also interested to come to Rwanda. I represent the ADNE, the Association of the Diaspora Network in Europe, and we believe that Africa should not be looked at as just an entity with borders, but instead as a space that includes the diaspora, and we should work at increasing the capacity of the diaspora people to also return back home. We can be much more than just taxpayers in Europe and sending back money to Africa. We can be part of this process. We can also be part of the financing of these projects. We have diaspora mutual funds. We actually, these remittances that we send back to Africa are now more than the aid. So we're thinking, why can't we just put our resources together and provide us kind of seed capital that you mentioned, and be part of that financing process too? Yeah. Thank you.
So thank you very much. An approach going beyond simply remittances and trying to have some collective action to move forward. We also have Mr. Spachis, who is the Secretary General of the EBCAM, which is the European Business Council for Africa and the Mediterranean. Perhaps just also very briefly, perhaps if you can stand up and just a couple of comments and perhaps reaction also to what you have heard.
In reciprocity to you, I'm standing up while the panel is sitting down. The European Business Council for Africa and Mediterranean is the European Federation of national chambers or associations doing business in Africa. And therefore, the membership is more than 4,000 companies, representing hundreds of thousands of employees interested to do business in Africa. Yesterday, we have organized a session within the context of the Europe-Africa Business Forum, which took place in the same building in another auditorium. And here are the conclusions of that session. The session subject was specific, sectoral. It was sustainable energy enterprises and the role of public-private partnerships. And here are 2 or 3 main points of the conclusions. First of all, the companies interested in the sector have appetite for investment in many countries, including Africa, of course. Second point, they are all seeking a good enabling environment, stability, rule of law, security of investment, unsurprisingly. Third point, they are all seeking some sort of risk reduction, at least for the project conception and initiation phase, meaning how we can help them mitigate the risks, reduce the risks. They are ready to take some risk, but not all the risk. And here is the message for the donor community and for the government agencies that want to create investment. Then came some other ideas. There is the need...
30 seconds. Yeah, just go.
No, I'll take the time needed.
Sorry?
I'll take the time needed very quickly. The time needed is that we have also to find solutions about how to make the consumers in Africa pay for the services of energy. And one way of thinking about it is how to make it in smaller fragments, so don't ask the consumers to pay upfront big investments, but ask the consumers to participate in installments in the services they are getting for energy, and bundle to that services like internet, telephony, or maybe television. And conclusion, there is appetite for energy, but public policy needs to follow.
Thank you very much. I didn't want to cut you, but I just want to make sure that everybody has also a chance to speak. And very briefly, we have Ms. Oliva from AFSI, an Italian NGO. How do you react also to some of the comments that we've just heard?
Yeah, I can briefly share the experience of AFSI in some of the countries in Africa that I think is very relevant from what has been told now. I've worked for 7 years in Uganda, and Uganda is the most entrepreneurial country in the world. This is data from 2015. So it means that every year, 1 million new enterprises are born. This sounds amazing. So is there any problems there? It sounds like not. But the problem comes 1 year after, when half of them are not surviving anymore. And 2 years after, even less than them survive. So there's a lot of need of accompanying these entrepreneurs. The entrepreneurs need to be the protagonist of this change. So what we have been doing is to provide business incubation, so sharing the same experience that is happening in Northern Africa. And we are especially promoting those that have a social impact and that are inclusive and that are innovative. Most of these businesses bring up innovations that are very peculiar to the context, that cannot be imported from Europe or from any other place. And these innovations have a social impact as well, because they produce services or products that are accessible to the poor, or they can create a lot of jobs. And those are the businesses that the investment funds are interested in. And those are the businesses that the big companies from outside are interested to partner with. So in our view, in APSI view, it is key to work with these protagonists from from the local places, from the local people. So the entrepreneurs need to become protagonists.
Thank you very much. We don't have much time for the discussion. I was hoping we would have more, but we had a very entertaining discussion on the panel. I will take one round of questions, so if you have any questions, please raise your hands, and I'm going to collect a few of them so then we can turn back to the panel. Please, sir.
Yes.
Please briefly introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm a Belgian citizen, and I would like the following question to the panel. I'm working on a pilot project that is called Circular Migration for Highly Educated African People. The pilot project with Senegal. There are actually 5 Senegalese engineers working for 12 months here in Belgian companies. They get paid for their prestations that they get paid for. What is your opinion about such a program? The aim is to industrialize Africa.
Thank you. There was another question here. Yes,
Here.
please.
Can you listen to me? Okay,
Yep.
good. I'm coming from the European Confederation of Junior Enterprises, and we work with entrepreneurship in universities. And I want to know, how do you perceive the skills mismatch today, and how can we engage youth in industrialization? How can we prepare them more? And I'll pass also to my colleague who wants to make a question.
I also have a question to make. It's related to considering the rise of migration flux with the increase of human population in the world until 2050 to close to 10 billion people. How we can plan at a political and economical level the cities of the future and of nowadays?
Thank you. The 2 ladies in the front, yes.
Thank you. My name is Caroline Gonza from the ACP EU Development Minerals Program. My question is really about the theme of this panel, moving from words to action. How do we really make private sector financing affordable to the artisanal and small-scale level, particularly for the natural resources sector? We have very artisanal, small-scale people whose major barrier to the enterprises is access to financing. How do we make this happen for them?
That's the point that Rose Sakala was also raising. Please.
My name is Pilani Koza. I come from Malawi. Mine is not a question, but just a comment on the young leaders' points on where you're saying that at least we should focus on long-term goals, teaching someone how to fish and not just giving fish. So I'm also quoting what the late President Dr. Bingu Mtaliga kept on saying, that at least if you teach developing countries how to feed themselves and not necessarily giving them maybe aid. Of course, aid is quite good to just bridge a gap on what they already have, but then should not be regarded as the main solution to developing countries' problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There's one here. Yep.
Hello, I'm Eric Postel from United States Agency for International Development. So a comment from the other side of the pond, which is that we're working so much with the private sector, but in going forward, building on the SDGs, to us it's a matter of not asking private sector to help us do development. They're not an open checkbook for us, but the 2 implications are, number one, that if we're going to have sustainable work with them, so if we work with a retailer on educating women and girls, it should be because it is to their business benefit, that those are their future clients and their future customers. But also similarly, the equity and sustainability are very important to us and the partner governments. But if a government's going to say, well, we have a transparent auction for power, and what the private sector will do is at a certain price, and then government says, I don't like it, so I'm just going to rip up the contracts, that's going to move us backwards. But the government can take the revenues they receive from taxation and so forth and subsidize for the people who can't afford it. Because of course, as all of us working on development, we've got to think about the equity and the inclusion aspects, not just on the private sector. But if we stick to this way, then we can have really sustainable cooperation with the business sector because they will want to keep doing it because it's in their core interest, and then we're achieving our development goals, which is our core interest. At least that's how we see it.
Thanks, and that relates also to some of the questions that we've received via the app, which is related, for instance, for the European Union, but I think more generally, how do you ensure equal voice and benefits for the most vulnerable when you invite powerful private sector partners in development? So that's powerful private sector. I'm thinking SCS, you must be experiencing these kind of things. And perhaps in similar line, there's another question asking in French, is comment faire pour que les PPP...
How can we ensure that PPPs do not end up...
Big business and those that are doing rent seeking are capturing the benefits of the public-private partnership. So how do you reach out to the weakest one? And a third question is around, well, it's about trade. I'm not sure we'll go into the trade agreements, but more generally, how do you strengthen in these efforts of engaging with the private sector the whole dimension of sustainability? That is very important. That is a key criteria we're trying to achieve, and not just attracting investment for the sake of attracting investment. You had a range of questions. I'm not sure we have 5 minutes, so we won't be able to address them all. Who wants to start answering?
Okay,
Ms. Sakala.
I'll answer the young lady there, because what she's doing is, what she asks is mostly what we're doing. In engaging the youth in universities, that's where we come in to, you know, when you're telling the youth would like to implement their own ideas, and they would like to work for themselves. And it's just a matter of balancing how to cultivate the idea in making it attractive for the investors to invest in the idea. So going around universities and telling, because like, for example, my university has 4,500 students, and when you bring this idea of, guys, look, we have 1 million of us graduating, or 4,500 of us graduating, but how many people are going to create space for us? Retirement is 65, you get? So that is how most, for example, like Save the Children works with the women that are teenage mothers, and have helped like 4,500, but that's a civil society organization. But this feeling has to start from us, the young people. I'm not trying to back it up for us, but we've got to stand up for ourselves and say we've got to sit on our ideas, be disciplined to work on a paper and work on your idea such that it is attractive and that can attract many more people to fund it, and then implementation. So it has to start from us, and then the rest will get attracted to it.
Thank you. You want to address one of the questions? Don't answer all of them. But
no, exactly, because I mentioned a catalytic role that we could play, and hearing also all the questions and the comments, it's so much about local presence, local knowledge, and I think we can bring comfort to investors in actually building these platforms of interaction. I mean, UNOPS has 10,000 personnel around the world in more than 80 countries, so we bring comfort to investors. We bring actually the local voice into the picture as well. And I think to diversify the financial instruments, this is a debate that goes on in any country. What does it mean to bring entrepreneurs over what is called Death Valley? We know that after 1 year, a lot of the initiatives are facing a hard time. What do we need to do in that phase? Small and medium-sized businesses, what do we need to actually be relevant to them? Not only the big investors. We know energy comes at a very high price in many developing countries. There is actually somebody who is able and willing to pay. So what dialogue do we need to have with governments on predictability to really be able to provide energy solutions at a higher scale? So all these debates need to take place, but at different levels.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, just on the question of migration, circular migration, and I would say the skills mismatch comes into the same kind of area. I think that's very good. I think that's an excellent way of trying to find a way to address these issues. But Unfortunately, we also know the situation in the EU today, which means that migration in terms of free flows legally is not really something which is there. So we have to find ways and means to do this. Erasmus program is one. I think what you pointed to is a very interesting one. Linked to this one, I think, is that we need, in our dialogue with partners, to discuss issues like vocational education and training, and see to that investments are being made into that one, and not only into the university side, and that universities are also producing what is going to be working well when it comes to the economic growth, when it comes to investments, when it comes to the entrepreneurs that needs to be on there. And here I think we can do quite a lot with experience we have from our own countries and what we have been doing ourselves.
Thank you.
I wanted to address the point about skills and also the point about sustainable cities and the sustainable cities of the future. It's essential to have the right skills. It's equally important to have the right information. When you actually plan a city, and we have so many examples in Europe of planning cities when we actually had the right skills planning-wise, but we didn't have the right set of information. So what happens now is when we plan cities, we don't think of aquifers, we don't think of water supply, we don't think of growth. We don't actually have the information to make sound sort of environmental, sustainable decisions about how to build the cities of the future. So I would say skills are incredibly important. You need to have people who can make the right decisions. But in order to make the right decisions, even with the right skills, you need the right information. So a lot of what we work on is actually, and I think it goes to the point of satellites, there's things that we think are normal in Europe, the information that we have at hand, the knowledge that we have, the data about soil quality, about water, that doesn't exist everywhere in the world. So where these cities of the future are going to be, we actually have relatively little data about sort of water, soil, and important elements in order to make decisions about sustainable cities. So I think that that's one of the things where we could work private, public sector to provide that data, to actually have the information that helps with the skills to build sustainable cities.
Thank you, madam.
Alors moi, je voudrais, par rapport à l'intervention de monsieur...
With respect to Mr. Dorop, who talked about getting into business with Africa, I think the days are gone where Africa just sold raw materials or consumer goods. Africa of today needs partnerships, and this is normal because this is a continent that has a very high GDP growth percentage, makes the continent very interesting, a large young population. So the question about how to interact with Africa, well, Africa is becoming a more and more mature continent, and we have to talk about win-win partnerships now, where we're talking about technology transfers that can really be based on the private sector in Africa. Of course, the countries also have to make an effort to try and create a good business climate and also to improve their doing business ranking. However, I think that the future is going to be one of win-win partnerships, and it's true that Africa is a continent with a bright future. I personally do a lot for economic diplomacy, and when you think of an investor, if he wants to invest in a country or a continent, well, he wants reassurances. He wants reassurances about compliance and risk as well. So the approach, I think, needs to be different. We need to look at the specificities of each country because the African continent is very large and very diverse. There's a lot of differences between countries. So I think we really need to take on this global approach to see how we can reach this goal.
Leon, you want final words to answer a couple of questions? We have to then stop.
Yes. Thank you, Sam, for giving me the precious time. I think one issue is about local entrepreneurs. It's very important if a country cannot develop local entrepreneurship, no very sound regulation policy, supportive to the local entrepreneur, small, medium enterprises, it will, I just would like to say, it's not a right policy. They must support that. Think about the developed countries. Also, those companies, you can name maybe thousands of companies when they register, and at the end of the year, maybe 95% of them disappear. This is a market discipline. Final words, just to conclude that industry matters. This is UNIDO's message, because look at any country, industry really matters, especially after financial crisis, we need to. But industry must be inclusive, must be green, sustainable. This is very, very important. We promote this. And also PPP. Government need to play its role. Government cannot keep hands off everything. They must be accountable, responsible for what I said. And private sector will come and play their show. They will play and create a win-win situation. This is what we are doing, what we've seen. And final word is that we don't argue this, argue that, because approaches, variety approaches to different countries, different situations. But most important test is just like cats theory. Black cats, white cats, doesn't matter. If you really can catch the rats, you really can create a job, can create the growth, we support it. This is our doctrine. So we would like to work with the international community and work in line with EU policy, moving ahead with economic diplomacy, and really create momentum, scale up the momentum for job creation, economic growth, which will contribute to the migration issue to a certain extent. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I think they deserve a round of applause. Thank you very much. That concludes our panels on words to action, innovative solutions to make the SDGs work by engaging the private sector. I think what I retained from the discussion first is that there's a lot of innovation. There are a lot of ideas, a lot of initiatives that are taking place, both at the global level, at the international level. But when we're doing that, we have to really draw and build from the local initiatives and the local synergies. I think these are the kind of elements, both from the individuals. We heard really stories of, from an individual level to the local companies, to the local governments, at local level, national level, that have to be involved. And that it is the business environment, but not just the business environment conducive for the private sector, but also all the policies related to that, education, skills, health, which do matter, social policies that are important to be fostered if we want to promote the private sector engagement. The notion of risk mitigation and risk mechanism also came quite often, and the need to have better projects that are in place, but that is not supposed to be done just for the sake of only creating any type of jobs, but it's to consider the sustainability dimension that is really key. And I think, Mr. Long, I really like your last comments, your black cat, white cat analogy, that what matters is not the color of the cat, but whether you catch the rat. I think that in the question of reaching out for sustainability goals and the job creations that is needed in most of the developing countries, we need a different type of approaches that are combined together. And in that sense, probably the organization of this panel, I mean, there's an amazing amount of organizations that came together. I mean, UNIDO, UNOPS, SCS, Conservation International, and ADNA all came together to try to, and I've been witnessing this interaction among the organizers on preparing this panel, and it is probably a kind of concrete action of multi-stakeholder partnerships, different views, and trying to see how to bring together. So I would like to thank you all, and I hope we'll see plenty of action in the coming weeks, months, and years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.